a very large welcome to Amanda Follit.
Where am I putting that? Hello everyone, just before I start, have I got any designers in the room? Oh, thank God. I'm not a designer. You'll see from our PowerPoints that it's actually awful in terms of that. So my name is Amanda Follit. I'm talking to you about the journey I had. I spent many, many, many years in testing, going through to quality, head of quality, and now work in a very different role. But the roles that I play, whether it be inside Amaze or outside of Amaze, actually it's the testing foundations that have given me the skills that I needed to do it. So the early days, I give my age away here. So this is talking about education and beyond. And before I came into testing, there's a key one here, homelessness. That was me. I haven't changed much. This was my first computer. Who had one of these? Anyone in the audience? What is it? It is. My parents, I had a green screen like this because my parents didn't want me to have a colour one because that was for games. And no, I wanted to learn how to use it. So Hello World and creating address databases was about all I could do. I really wanted to use it to play a game called Gauntlet that was absolutely brilliant, this role-playing game. So I grew up, I went to a grammar school. You know, they forced down our throats that you go into being a doctor. You're a social worker, actually. The career said I was going to be a social worker. My IT teacher, who was also our maths teacher at the time, she gave us our computing lesson. We learnt punch cards, we learnt barcodes, we learnt how it was used in tills. Didn't teach us much more. Didn't get to use the computers, it was all theoretical. My maths, when I passed my maths GCSE, she stood at the top of the stairs and her voice was like this. I've got a good impersonation over the years. Amanda Follit, I don't know how you got that. You didn't deserve it. You'll never do anything with computers or maths. And that's what she said to me. It was an all-girls school, so it wasn't about being a girl. Anyway, amongst this, I was very theatrical. I did amateur dramatics. My parents actually wanted me to be a piano teacher. That's what they wanted. So I went to Amdram. I featured in Salad Days, Billy Lie, did a lot of amateur dramatics and musicals. And this is me on stage at one point when I was about 19. But then I went to college and I did some humanities, but I found philosophy. Philosophy, make a note there, that was one of the most valuable subjects, or the most valuable subject that I learned in my education, especially when it came to testing. When you're reading functional specs, if this, then that, it's completely what philosophy is about, logical progression. And so it got me thinking. And then this was me. See how terrible this is, right? So this was my car, parked on Ramsgate Seafront in Kent. I decided to leave home, clashed with my parents very much because they wanted me to be a piano teacher. I didn't want to be a piano teacher. I was going to be a pop star. I was going to be an actress. Or I wanted to be a games programmer back then. So I parked my car down here and I lived in my car. Had to leave college. What I didn't know was they still counted my parents' finances, so wouldn't actually give me any money to go to and carry on my A-levels. And that's my clothes hanging up here in the car. So it was like, what do I do? I'm 18 years old. I'm living in my car. What do I do? So I walked up and down the streets. So I got my first job. And when it comes up, this was the job centre that I went to. And in the day, they gave you stamps. They let you use the computers, the very early computers, print off your CV, gave you CV help. And I walked up and down the high street and handed in my CV to people. And then somebody said, do you know what? We'll get you selling laminated maps. Well, I'd be out of business now, wouldn't I? Thanks to Google. A few years later. But they said, you're the youngest ever that we'd get doing that, but yeah, we've got confidence. You've got a car, right? Yeah. Well, come down to Cheltenham for the interview. This is from Kent. Homeless person, no money, didn't happen. So all of a sudden, radio rentals, most people will know that of a certain age. I came in, this little kid with glasses, came in, and I knew stuff that the older women in there didn't know. I knew how to set up VHS videos. That was amazing. I could program them. They're like, oh, we've never had anyone who could do that. So they gave me a job instantly. But then what happened in the 90s, we had these come in. These are Olivetti computers. I'll show you the Inspirational ad that we had for it in a minute. And it was like, oh my God, I can play with the computer in work. And then the DX2 chip came out from Intel. It was amazing because you could do maths faster. This was the advert. Is it going to play? Oh, does it play from there if you can? Yeah. You know, this is what happens when you have a room full of testers, isn't it? We just like attract it.
It's because we're all looking at it.
It is, absolutely. If you had a developer, sorry, who's the developer? Can you come and stand here? We'll all turn away and it'll work for you. Right, let's move on past the advert. See, it's still searching for the source. Oh, detect. We'll get past the advert, but it's an advert of a man saying that he wants to buy an Olivetti and what it can do, and they were £60 a month over 5 years. That's how much one of them cost. Luckily, I got it cheap rate, so I managed to have this Olivetti computer sitting in my home. And what happened was then the internet. Windows 95 came onto these computers later. I went to work for Eurostar. I had language skills, so I also had a child in between, which I haven't told you, who's now 21. But I had a young child, and I was like, right, what can I do? I'll do shift work. And Eurostar had just opened their Ashford terminal. So this was just after Eurostar launched. And there's me in my nice uniform, and with the England rugby team. It's fetching, as you can tell. But this led on to greater things, because I learnt how to use reservation systems. Has anyone ever worked in global distributed systems, testing reservation systems or anything like that? Let me show you what they look like. Ooh, that way. Okay, that's my black dog that came in between. Does everyone understand what a black dog is? Yeah. Depression. But what got me out of it was he wanted to stay. Go away, black dog. What got me out of it was rugby. I know, Ian Carroll, you're a massive rugby fan. I played women's rugby. It's unfortunate I was a hooker as a woman. But it taught me strength and teamwork. And when I was in a very, very low state, I was admitted into hospital for 13 weeks with severe depression and bipolar. It helped me through it. Unfortunately, it's not going to help me through this. And then, if it comes back, it's all right. So what happened was I started testing these reservation systems. So I'd learned them from using them. So Eurostar said, we're looking for people to come up and test. Well, what happened was Netscape Navigator Gold came out in 1995. Was anyone around there using that at the time? It wasn't a browser, it was a WYSIWYG editor for HTML. It was amazing. All of a sudden, I had a voice of the outside world. I could create web pages just by using this raw editor. We're going to connect directly. That's all right. So it was a fantastic thing. So I actually then started creating web pages for other people. It was amazing. I also, in 1995, because it had gone from BBS to the internet and chat systems, I started talking on powwow to people in Canada. I went off on a holiday to Canada on my own. Just somebody I met on the internet, some friends. It was brilliant. And then what happened was I bought a moose mug from Alaska because I could. It was 1995, it's the internet, and actually e-commerce didn't exist, but you could contact them, buy this mug with moose poo in the mug from Alaska. And it came in 6 weeks, and this was amazing. I'd never, ever seen anything to do with Alaska. The internet opened my life up. So with all this knowledge, with building web pages for people, rubbish web pages, as we'll show in a minute, I actually got taken up to London from Kent by Eurostar to test reservation systems. They went, you know how to use them, you always find the bugs in them for us. Come up and test this integration that we've got. And what they were doing, they were integrating British rail systems with European. It's called the Elgar system. Still going and interacts with all these different airline systems as well. AS400 back ends. Oh, here we go. Right in the right place as well. I just, actually, if I go back, it's given us the next slide as well. So these were the sort of rubbish that was put out. Here's my moose mug, right there with the moose poo in it. And of course, front page, FP hover class that floated around everywhere. Pow wow, ICQ, who remembers ICQ, the precursor to all these? This was my world back in '95. And then Elgar Direct. So this was an integration system with European rail systems and the British rail system. Not been done before, Eurostar was quite new. This is how you get up your fare, by typing in professional language in global distributed systems. This is what it looked like on AS400s. So they had me typing in this. You had to learn all these codes, what it means for all the countries, for all the passengers, all the chair types and everything. And this is what we had to learn. But I loved it because I found bugs before I got to use them on the reservation desk. And I met wonderful people who loved it too. And I found that actually I was really good at it. I could write test scripts that would find everything. And they said they'd never found so many bugs as when I joined them. And I found this community of testers within Eurostar. But it was only a secondment until we had that system. So what they did, they shipped me back off to the ticket desk. And I absolutely hated it. When passengers are coming up and asking you stupid questions, I couldn't deal with the public anymore. I wanted to be in IT. And that was it. It's like, right, full-time job. They offered for me to manage their intranet, brand new intranet, managed by front page. I said no. And I got my first full-time role as a tester, actually known as a tester, for a company called Bell & Howell in Watford. So I even moved up to Watford for it. And this was electronic parts catalogues. And I could tell you every part from a Suzuki engine, an outboard motor, because I loved these things. But what I discovered here, one of the skills that I learned from this, was that people don't use things the way that you think they do and the way you design them to. It was a massive learning curve for me when there was a guy in Suzuki in the parts dealers, and he said, I just can't use it. It won't work for me. Like, you click here. We had mice. You click here, you do this. I went down to visit him. He didn't have a mouse. We designed it to be used with a mouse. He didn't have one. These parts dealers didn't have them. So it's like, well, actually, we haven't factored that in. We've got to think about the usability, as it then became. And we weren't designing for users. We were designing for taking microfiches into electronic parts catalogues. So I learned an awful lot. And I learned all these. I then went out to work in Ohio. Loved it. Got drunk most nights, but also tested and taught other people how to test for these systems for GM, Suzuki, and vehicles all around the world. But what happened was they sent me back from the US. And I was like, oh, I don't want to go back into my old job again. This has happened. I need to take a next step. So I went into management. I went to work for a company. I can't show you web pages because they don't exist in that entity anymore. They were called APR, Applied Psychology Research in London, who are now Smart Logic. So they went on to become Smart Logic. They couldn't sell their products. Their products were amazing. They couldn't sell them. But there was different things. There was affiliate marketing. So back in the days, this is 99, 2000, where they had a shopping portal. It was all affiliate marketing, click-through. That's how they got their revenue. And that was really of that generation. MyTaxi.com was one of the biggest and took revenues, had lots of work around it. Umius, which was intelligent understanding of behavior of users that then linked in to recommend you things. So very much unlike the Amazon one, where it's if you bought that, then you'd probably like this because they did. It was more as a collected, you, me, and us. If I like it, you like it, and they, well, the chances are that we'll recommend that. It was brilliant. You could get any books through it that you wanted. I read so many books. I read 60 in a year because it recommended them. So, unfortunately, so they couldn't really sell it, and I moved north. So that was in London. I then got offered a position at a very young Money Supermarket. Has anyone here worked at Money Supermarket? Aha! Not in my time, though.
No.
No. Okay, yeah, way after my time. So when I joined, this is a curve of how long I was there for, and how many staff. I joined, I was about the 40th member of staff in a little office where we smoked in the office still, back in the day, in Chester. And at the time, they had Money Supermarket, which had been written by a guy called Matt Riley, the actual Money Supermarket. They had a team of people who used to go and check websites to update interest rates. That's what they did. And that team grew, and they had a mortgage brokerage as well. And that's what were the foundations of it. And what happened was, Citibank in the US had released in the UK this account comparison service. If you had an account, you could compare your cards and their interest rates. And Simon Nixon, our CEO, I was like, this is amazing, we should do this. So they created View My Accounts, which was great, and you could link in all your point schemes and whatever, and then compare and go to Money Supermarket to get your lead for your new credit card, because it was a better interest rate. But then he said, well, what if we could do this for other things? We're like, okay, so we got guys called Yodlee over from America to tell them what we wanted to do. At this time, I joined as QA manager. I then became the project manager because I was there's 40 of us, and I could become project manager. I could control things, I thought. And also I became, because I'd learned HTML and JavaScript, the script team manager, because all the scripts were written in JavaScript for scraping. Somebody went off and wrote the Java engine, my team wrote the JavaScripts, and we tested it, which put me in a prime position because we could foresee what was going to come through, because it was basically test-driven development in terms of the scripts. What are we looking for? Let's script it from that point of view, and let's develop it on that basis from testing. So it put me in a prime position. Then the Yodlee guy said, you'll never do it, it's impossible, you can't do insurance, you can't do this. Well, we all know the story, go compare, and Confused followed after. We released home insurance in 6 months, and it was awful. We didn't actually release it. We fudged everything because we said as testers and QA, you can't do that, it's not going to work. Oh, yes, we can do everything. We need to get to market, and of course it didn't work, so we had to revisit it. We then, with our test scripts and automation, and Andy, who is earlier, talked about automation, we used things such as QA Run back in the day to actually test the scripts, to test it. We released a new channel, as it was called, every 6 weeks. 6 to 9 weeks, the original 6 months. We then put automation in place for testing, and it took 6 to 9 months. But I also then went to Simon and said, you know what, you know your team of people who are going and checking websites? Why don't we use test automation? They can tell us if something's changed. If it's changed, then go and see it, and then you've got a new interest rate. You don't need people checking 60, 100 websites every day. Test automation can do that for you. Started looking at how you can use technology in a different way. But of course, everyone was frightened for their jobs, so they didn't want to do it. But I had a guy sat there, and he scripted this, and we could tell them when websites had changed, and we needed to update our interest rates. But let's say I had many hats on in that instance, and then I went in 2005, we grew it to 250, painful as hell. Absolutely painful. When you're growing that fast and there's no structure, so it's about putting structure. And that's how I met Duncan, because I hired Duncan. He came from Sony, and brought him in, and he was one of my core testers. So then I was made redundant. 2005, the whole IT team were restructured, and I was made redundant, and everyone else was. And it was a good thing. It was a case of the religious debates. Steve Krug mentions in Don't Make Me Think about religious debates. I was constantly having religious debates with the board about what travel supermarkets should be like, what travel should be. No, actually, if you make it different from Expedia, and make it so different that you're asking people when you want to come back before you go, because that's what it was, then people aren't going to feel comfortable, and they'll go off. Oh, that's rubbish. That's rubbish. But that's because it was early days of thinking, and Don't Make Me Think of Steve was brought into that. So, made redundant, thought my life was over. I was actually, through the growth, I actually felt I was awful at my job. Thought I'll never be able to work in this field again. Was I that bad? Didn't look at the successes, actually. I was the first person, the project manager on the first ever comparison engine, as it's known now. It was product aggregation. We got it to market, turned it around, so we had one every 6 weeks. Built a successful team, and it was driving huge revenues for Money Supermarket. I didn't look at that. I looked at where's my career gone. So I had to get back on the horse. So I decided to test the water and just do a year's contract with a company called Anchor, who are now called Torex Retail. Very different world, but because I'd worked in affiliate marketing and then purchasing online, which we know now as e-commerce, it was like, well, actually, this is a good fit, and I've worked in retail, so I went to work for Anchor. Now, that was very much about putting test processes across Europe in what is a mixture of IT infrastructure around your payments, right through to your front end in terms of the user interface. These were the user interfaces. These were only 10 years ago. It's amazing, isn't it, what the difference is? This was a till 10 years ago. So I went out to Amsterdam, I went out to this godforsaken place called Bielefeld and tested their till systems and put then in place processes so that they could literally, from help desk report a bug, right through to development, regression test, back out it goes very quickly because there was a blocker. It made me feel good and I learned so much from it. I learned, actually, do you know what, I am pretty good at my job. Look at what the difference is. Help desk were getting things turned around. Their customers, who were the likes of Harrods, for example, and all the airports, were really pleased at getting these bugs sorted. The best thing, though, was being able to detect where the bugs were as it came through support, looking at logs, finding some critical ones, such as it was chip and pin was just released, and they couldn't work out what was going wrong. And you went into a shop, I'm not going to name the shop, because it's nothing to do with the shop, it was the software. You go into a shop, you pay with your credit card, you leave. The next person who pays on a credit card, yeah, use a person before's credit card. And the next time you went in, you can imagine the outcry. But it was like everyone was tearing their hair out. We came in, looked through, and there it was. So the processes worked. We managed to get things discovered very quickly. So then it was like, do I carry on in QA? Yeah, let me have a look. I've got these skills, but actually I've learned about support now. I've learned about help desk. Where can that take me? I've learned a lot of life skills along the way. And I got offered a position at Amaze 10.5 years ago with Ian Carroll. I haven't seen Ian Carroll in 10 years. And we worked there together, the early days, the horrific days. So they started in 1995, came out of JMU. Roy Stringer was a complete and utter visionary. He created something called the Navihedron, which was around learning. They went out with CD-ROMs, and he basically predicted what we're doing now in 2016. He predicted back in 95 and was a real forefather and a futurist. Unfortunately, he passed away. But what happened was I came into a company that had a lot of legacy. Volkswagen, they built the first social media platform that was seen for the youth of Volkswagen, which was then bought by AOL. And they brought on these great clients, and I joined here. Now, my first input was setting up a support team, developers who were doing content. They didn't really want to be there. People didn't want to work. And it was like, what do we do? How do we get this? So we started bringing the right people in, and then I got put out in front of this big company called Lexus, taken out to Europe, sat in a room with the heads of marketing at Lexus to say what we're going to do. And I came up with a process of working on how we were going to support them, how we can increase quality. They didn't have consistency across their websites. And you'll see now where quality plays a part in what's happening now and what I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is digital governance. But I formed this whole team for them and a way of working based on my testing background. I changed their way of working at Lexus Europe, this big client. I then was put in front of them with 36 heads of marketing across Europe. Me? I had utter imposter syndrome. I don't know if anyone else has ever suffered that, but they're going to find me out. I don't know what I'm doing. And I stood in front of them and was like pinching myself. I'm telling these heads of marketing how to run their websites and how to operate. How this can't be happening. This is not real. They're going to find me out. And I felt that for a long time. And even now, I still feel it every now and then. It's called imposter syndrome, and you'll find that there's a lot of people who suffer. This is now, we've carried on with them. And then in 2010, landed Unilever by talking to them and telling them what we could do in terms of the process and their way of working globally. They were like, yeah, we'll have you. Once again, it was that moment of, oh shit, we've got to do it now and Do I know what I'm doing? So I've worked across all these clients in different ways. And it was great because I put in support, but support was a little bit boring. And once again, we started using technologies and ways of working that no one had done before. So it was like, well, what do we need to do? Then, alongside it, I found a passion that I had in rugby, found the skills that I'd once again got in testing, in foresight and planning. I created the biggest junior rugby festival in Wales. And that was purely through the skills that I'd had in planning and, as I say, foresight of looking at what's there, what could go wrong, very much a tester's attitude. How many of you can actually look at something and say, I'm probably going to be able to know where the bugs will lie in that because of how it's been developed? Can you say that? I think, yeah. I think a lot. You have that foresight. You start looking for the troubleshooting and where it could be to get to the root of it quickly. That's all right. So we're nearly there. Okay. So from that, I then coached rugby. Coaching rugby was very much how I'd learned to coach my staff. And I was then made chairman of a rugby team, and then I was put at an elite level, the only female coach in North Wales rugby. And I even coached at the Shane Williams Academy. I'm sorry, I do support the Welsh Rugby Union because I work for them. But once again, it was that factor of, how am I even doing this? But it was my skills that I'd learnt through the years. So it was about being self-sustaining from being homeless, going through testing in the dark days when nobody wanted to believe there was a bug. I was fresh to testing, no, there can't be a bug, and you're having to convince them and tell that story, and having debates. I managed to get myself in that position. And then a tragic circumstance happened where one child that I coached drowned, and I ended up being the parents' liaison. And once again, it was all the skills that I'd learned in debating through having the conversations. There is a bug. This is how you need to do it better. You know, is that functional spec right? No, we need to do testing this way. This is a process. Actually line me up to be able to have difficult conversations with people. That's where it stems from, absolutely stems from. And alongside that, I then set up my new music management agency. And that was from knowing how the internet should work, knowing how people should market from the skills that I'd got, from IT over the years, from testing. How do you do it better? Usability, what are people looking for? Usability extends to social media and marketing, because really it just overlaps with that. What are they looking for? How are they going to use it? And from that, I became successful in this, in putting bands out there and getting their social media presence out, managing their websites. And it came from them taking, and why it was called Possessive, taking possession of their own digital footprint rather than letting other people do it. And having quality in the content that they put out rather than these crappy iPhone videos that anybody takes to a concert and does. No, let's not have that. Do it yourself. Let's have quality in your brand as a band. And then I got put on to, I now run a music festival where I'm head of production, because year one, I found all the problems. And that's what it came down to. Well, you're not doing this, this is going to happen. And you know what? It wasn't software. It was a music festival, and they told me what they were doing, like, yeah, you're probably going to do that. Have you thought about doing that? What are you going to do? What is the risk? And once again, it stemmed from that mindset. And I actually got in Kerrang magazine by accident, being on stage, because I then became, I actually teched for them, for the guy who ran his computer on stage and his synthesizer, and they snapped me there. So all these things have come out of literally somebody who was homeless and walked up the streets and then went into IT and testing and built a foundation. I was in testing for about 10 years. And it comes back to the whole Suzuki thing. When I was that first testing role, my full-time role, where I was like, people don't use things like they should. There are other ways of doing things. And so from it, I built up all these services at Amaze. So some of these you'll never heard of because they're completely unique. They're innovative services, and I'm going to drill down on one because it's really relevant to the test environment. I've won awards for the innovation from the services because the change that I've created in organisations through using them. And that is literally having that mindset of what could go wrong. Where do I look first? Where are the weak points? Let's create almost a script of what might happen and what we need to do, and let's put out all our paths through. And it led to these services and using technology in a different way, which is where this award's come from, using data out of technology that we all use, but we didn't know it was there. So digital governance, does anyone know, rather than who's allowed to do what, why, when, does anyone know about digital governance tools? That's exciting because they are just test automation on live systems. And people are creating these. They're not as far advanced. They are screen scrapers. They're HTML. And what they do is they tell you, have I put errors on my website? And they flag them up, whether it be code, whether it be content. They work at a brand level. They tell you about accessibility, usability, SEO. That's what these tools do, which is great. And they do it, you can put it into a publishing queue and a publishing workflow for a CMS, for example, and it will tell you if there's a problem before it goes live. Who needs testers? Of course we do, because we need testers to work out what it is these things need to check for in the first place, because that's always gets missed out, is that chaos. If you don't have those testers saying what the process is and you automate it, you automate chaos. And it's exactly the same. But actually, out the back of that data, and now out the back of test data that we use and support system data, linked in with Google Analytics data and digital media data, these are all systems you're probably using. How many of you use Jira? Yeah. So using Jira data, using digital governance data, using the testers' test scripts outputs. What we can isolate there, working with our organisations that we work with, the likes of Unilever, Lexus, Toyota, is all of that information crunched together. When you overlay it and you actually analyse it and you look at the patterns, as a tester, how many of you would say actually you can just notice patterns now? And if you drill down to where things are automatically, can you see where things are going to happen because of the pattern?
It's experience-based testing.
Exactly. That knowledge is what's created this. If you look at a load of data, you can see where those patterns are and the correlations are. And from it, we've created effectiveness and efficiency, which is we're telling our customers that's how bad you're managing your digital estate, and that's the effect it's having on your ROI, on your CRO, on your any optimization. It's had a massive, massive change for our clients. They've organised their staff, they've trained their staff. We can drill down. One of the examples is in Nigeria for Unilever. We noticed that there was a trend in their support usage and how they were asking for help. We noticed a rise in their errors at a certain point. We noticed their Google Analytics and their conversion rate optimization actually was a bit of an issue in their engagement. We looked at that all together, and from it we said, there's somebody in Nigeria who shouldn't be. They're like, what do you mean? Our staff have been there for ages, it's fine. And this is the London HQ. Go and have a look. Well, actually, no, they had a new starter, they had a new person, they hadn't been trained, they were using somebody else's login, and they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't even know at a central point. We knew from data. We knew from Jira data, because we use that. We knew from digital governance, which is just like test automation now. And from that, building up that picture and having that mindset, that's where it got, which is a new way of using the tools we use every day and having that mindset of, well, what might be going on? Where might I get that information from? And it's now led to, and I'm just finishing up because I think I'm right on time now, digital skills gap. So it's now years on, it's like we all need to, I need digital governance analysts, for example. We need to increase our people that are coming through. You've probably seen it in testing. So from that, I've now then built up a community, seen a women's digital network, just from the innovative work of doing, getting a name. These are girls who, Liverpool Girl Geeks, or I did a confidence piece with them. And all this has happened, written articles based on this work. And it all stems down to that first testing job that trained me and learning and through experience and that experience-based testing. From homelessness to, well, awards. And that's me.